Akademiks joins the Joe Budden podcast to break down the Drake vs. Kendrick Lamar beef. But it happened before Meet the Grams and Family Matters drops, as well as Not Like Us and The Heart Part 6. So this was an interesting episode because it was released new today. However, it's kind of useless because so much information has dropped since. But I'm still going to break it down. But before I start, I just want to say that Joe Budden deeply needs some type of live IP or some way to address what's happening in real time. I don't want to hear this stuff about, Akademiks can do it. No, I want to hear you do it. I want to hear you do it. Sure, there's bigger platforms than me, right? There's Shigs. He breaks down what happens with the JBP. But there's a certain subset of my audience that's like, Danny, I want to hear you talk about it. I want to hear the way you discuss things. The way you break things down is different. And Joe is out here being mad delayed, slow to the punch. Do an Instagram live. Do something. He did do a space the other day, but it still was insufficient to me. And I know there's members of the cast that are willing to do it, but I gotta tell you, I listened to this whole thing and I was like, I stopped halfway because it was useless. It was pointless. It was like when NBA used to be on tape delay back in the 80s when they wouldn't air the finals live and people knew the results by going to the newspaper. But anyway, let's get down to what happened. So Akademiks arrived 25 minutes into the Patreon and he's wearing a scorpion hat, which leads Joe to immediately start saying that Drake is down and losing the battle. Then Joe says it's undeniable that K-Dot is winning, and Joe tries to get Ak to admit that Akademiks is compromised, but Akademiks disagrees. Joe then says Akademiks needs to be number 1 in the hip-hop media list, and that Joe needs to be number 2. After that, Joe says that if he is number 2, it will motivate him to be the top again. So I guess he's saying that he needs that level of motivation to kind of get back on his grind, even though he's on his grind. But I feel like it's been a bit rudderless as of the last few weeks. Even the Drake Kendrick coverage has been a bit muted compared to the type of coverage Joe used to do when Drake dissed Pusha, when Pusha dissed Drake. But Ak brings up Adam 22 when talking about the whole media thing. And Joe says he doesn't give a damn about Adam 22 or his family, specifically talking about his dad. He didn't mention like his kids or anything because it could sound like that. But then Joe theorizes about Kendrick Lamar dropping at a time where the Joe Budden podcast drops. And Ak says that it's a possibility that Kendrick Lamar is using the Joe Budden drop times to get his narrative out there. The whole idea of dropping right when the Joe Budden podcast is about to record. Kendrick has been doing that while Drake has been doing the opposite. Ak follows up by saying that he believes there was some sort of bad interaction that happened when Drake and Kendrick first met, and that could have sparked the beef. This is something very similar to Shaq. I remember Shaq said that he met David Robinson, and David Robinson treated him terribly, and that led to him hating David Robinson the rest of his life. It was later found out that Shaq was completely lying and made that up, and David Robinson is one of the nicest people. But sometimes people invent things in their head to feel bad about in order to justify their actions. But then Ak paints the picture that Kendrick has been harboring resentment, but the cast pushes back and says Kendrick might have an actual issue with Drake. Ak then says Kendrick is slightly up. Remember, this is before Meet the Grams and, of course, Family Matters and Not Like Us and The Heart Part 6. Ak then says this is the first time Drake has ever been on the defensive. That's true. This is the first time Drake is kind of having to deal with an onslaught as Kendrick bombs away. They then start to get into this mole theory with Ak saying that there's no real mole and everyone is posturing, but the JBP cast disagrees. A lot of people believe there's an actual mole in the camp. I tend to side with Ak. I don't think there's a real mole. I think that, you can kind of just see from afar what's going on. Like, I don't think Kendrick revealed what information did Kendrick reveal that's like brand new. It's essentially what Joe Ross and Pusha T said. It's the same thing. That's like nothing new. And it also stands to reason that an artist with that big of a camp, an artist that's the top of the game, has a leak that is saying really innocuous information. But then they start to get into rumors that might be true. Joe said that he thinks, what if someone is sleeping with, somebody who might have switched genders? He thought that that might be something Kendrick uses. Then everyone on the cast says Kendrick is cooking Drake, with Ak saying that Kendrick is using better angles. So I actually think Ak is being the most impartial, and the rest of the cast is just riding for Kendrick. Joe then drops a bombshell and says he's been communicating with Drake throughout this whole battle with K-Dot. Now, this is interesting because it is thought that Drake and Joe don't get along, but even if they are communicating, I would think it's kind of that passive-aggressive, I don't really rock with you, but I want to still keep you in my orbit because we have unresolved issues and I actually like you, but I want to see you fail. It's that type of thing. But let me know what you think about Drake and Joe being in communications. I assume this is through Instagram DMs because they love to kind of shoot at each other. Very interesting things. Then everyone disagrees with things being close after Axe says that, this battle was close. Then something interesting happens when the cast talks about how this may be a play to unseat Drake as the dominant rapper. All right, this idea that labels, people in the industry are tired of Drake's reign, and now with the industry changing, they want to see Drake go. But Imani adds that this same thing happened to Michael Jackson as he started to take ownership of people's catalog and started buying labels up. That's when the allegations started and he started to unravel. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens with Drake. We'll see if something to the level of what Michael Jackson went through occurs. Remember, Michael Jackson went through some serious things. He was being investigated. Drake has yet to arrive to that. Like, if that is the takedown, then maybe Drake is in for a rough next 5 years. But I am curious to see how the paths of Drake and Kendrick will evolve after they made some serious accusations. What if Drake does get caught up or something like that? I don't think he will. What if Kendrick does get caught up and, it is revealed that what Drake said about his tumultuous family life is actually true? Think about that. How will that change the perception of this battle? A little later, Ak highlights that Drake seems to be getting into a defensive stance again versus Kendrick, who is taking a more offensive stance. Ak then notes that Drake is the actual underdog against Kendrick because Kendrick picked the battle. Joe disagrees and says Ak is moving a bit defeated after initially being excited for the battle. Now, this is something that Joe's completely right about. I remember when Akademiks was like, oh, Drake has been waiting for this his whole life. Well, I don't know if Drake was waiting for it. It really does look like Kendrick sat down in the studio and lived there for multiple hours. And I don't think Drake did the same thing, but I still got Drake. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know a lot of you are going to be in my comments making inappropriate comments about how I'm glazing or wipe your mouth and really insecure things to say. And I don't think you would ever say that to me. And if you did, I would debate you and you would lose. All right, then they highlight how neutrals are flocking to Kendrick. This is a total fact. I was listening to Joe's Twitter space, and it seemed like everybody who was from Atlanta was rocking with Kendrick, and it wasn't just because it was Kendrick. It was because all the Atlanta guys seemed to not like Drake. And yeah, the neutrals are turning the tide of this battle, but I will say, let's wait a couple years. Let's see how the battle ages. Remember, it was thought Nas washed Jay-Z. But now people think Jay-Z beat Nas. So we'll see how these records age. A lot of people are living in the moment. A lot of people are living through the timeline. But that's not the end-all be-all. So we will see. Then the cast says Drake was way too arrogant on Tailor Made. I don't know why that's a problem. You got to be arrogant. But we'll see. We'll see. This is where I stopped watching the show. I'm going to be completely honest. It kind of felt pointless to me because this conversation happened before Family Matters, Meet the Grams, Not Like Us, and The Hard Part 6. It was useless. I'm sorry, it was completely useless. I was watching this, I was like, let me go get my day started. I don't need to be here But let me know what you think in the comments. If the rest of the episode was good, I'm sorry, man. The science was dated. Sometimes the science needs to be done in the moment. I'm not watching this whole thing. But I do feel like this general talking point list I have was definitely the gist of what was said as I looked online, and it kind of felt that way. But a couple of notes I have is Akademiks and Joe just need to start doing content solely together again. I really feel like the cast was like the 6th and 7th wheel. Like, they don't really need to be there. Flip is not there, which is interesting to me. I wonder if Flip was told, hey, we don't need you here, or if Flip just exercised his contractual obligations. From what I saw so far, Melissa Ford was, she was all right. Parks was cool. He obviously is Team Kendrick because he prefers the bars. He loves the bars. Ish is saying that, Kendrick is up, which is a big deal because a lot of people thought Ish was Team OVO, but that goes to show you he has his own mind. And Ice, the same thing. Imani, the same thing. They all basically seems that they all think Kendrick is up. But remember, this is before all those records dropped, so it's kind of useless. It's a useless piece of content. Really dated, and like I said at the beginning of this video, Joe needs to find ways to be more timely. I think he could have been one of the preeminent voices of this conversation, but given what occurred, that's not the case. Alright, y'all, let me know what you think in the comments. How do you feel about the cast talking about things? I think it was interesting if it had happened in real time, but it didn't, so it largely was an opportunity that was missed. Alright, y'all, I just want to get to a couple things. A lot of people in the comments have been insanely mean to me. I don't know why you're being so mean to me. Yeah, I guess, something's going on with your lives. I don't know. The other day somebody said, Danny, you sound sad. Why do I sound sad? What is sad? I'm totally fine. You gonna know when I'm sad when I stop posting. When I'm posted, I'm happy. Kick rocks. All of you that can't make an argument to save your life, so you have to resort to the moronic stuff that people say in 5th grade. You're stupid, you're moronic, you're idiots. But to the people who actually construct arguments versus ad hominem attacks, shout out to you. You guys know how to have a conversation. And I also want to say, I predicted Drake would do a Heart Part 6. Nobody, give me my flowers. As to what Drake does moving forward, I don't know. It seemed like he wants to bow out, but we'll see. I think the two will be shooting at each other even if this ends in the next week or so. That's my video for now. I got a video possibly coming about Savon and Rory, so stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace. 2